By the time the city started emptying, I had already sold every way out of it at least twice. I make my living on routes the planners pretend do not exist. Service corridors, forgotten stairwells, half-finished conduits in the Titan's bones. The bureaucrats have their clean diagrams. I have the ones with coffee stains and burn marks and holes where whole neighborhoods used to be. People pay me because I know which doors are never locked and which guards look away when they recognize my face. Fear always flows the same way in a crisis. First they queue up for the official lines, clutching papers, believing in rules. Then they see how slowly the lines move, how fast the shells fall, how fast the trains leave. That is when someone whispers my name. Sullivan Fraser. Sully, if you are paying in cash. When the bombardment started in earnest, every campboy with a flashlight suddenly thought he was a guide. Most of them just ran people in circles. The only ones who mattered were men like me, who knew the big bones like a second skin. There is the surface city, and there is the Titan underneath it. Streets and blocks above, ribs and vertebrae below. The trains wait out past the far ribs, beyond the blast zones, where the tracks can still carry you somewhere that is not on fire. Everyone knew that much. Almost no one knew how to reach the trains without passing official checkpoints. That was the gap the city gave me. I filled it. That day, I was already counting profit before we left the camp. Remy trotted beside me, narrow shoulders lost inside a coat 2 sizes too big, carrying my canvas map roll the way someone might carry sacred text. He had the jittery energy of a boy who never fully trusts the ground. I recognized it. I had grown up with it. "You sure the trains are still there?" he murmured, as if soldiers might hear hope and shoot it. If they were gone, we would have heard the screaming from here. I pushed through a lane of crates and sleeping mats and water drums. Stop worrying about the trains. Worry about the clients. They are the ones who will test us. You overbooked again. It means they value the service. It means if anything blocks the path, you have twice as many mouths yelling at you. That too. The camp sprawled in the Titan's shadow along the curve of its pelvis where construction had stalled generations ago. Bone arced above tenement roofs like pale monuments. For most people, the Titan was a landmark and a story. For me, it was infrastructure. The evac hub nearest our ward was already choking, lines knotted around barriers and tape. Loudspeakers barked about priority groups and documentation while men in uniform checked papers and scanned faces. Someone with brass paced the platform, waving lists and promising order. All of that was for people who believed the city suddenly cared. I cut left before the main gates, steering Remy down a service lane where the concrete was patched in a dozen shades. Our door sat behind a stack of supplies and a broken handcart. A bored conscript leaned against the wall, boot tapping a lazy rhythm. He straightened when he saw me. "Sullivan." We had an understanding, this man and I. In peacetime, I slipped workers and minor officers through his door for a cut. Now his cut had gone up. I tapped my pocket. "Busy day. Families?" He flicked his chin toward the camp. "Mixture. They still have money, which is what matters. You and your charity. If I were charitable, I would be standing in that line." We settled the price with a quick transfer. He opened the door with his card and let us through. The hub's noise cut off to a muffled roar. Stairs dropped into maintenance levels where the city hides its nerves. Remy exhaled as if he had been holding it since the surface. "How many this run?" "Enough to pay you if you do not get in the way." That is not an answer. I gave him a number. He swore under his breath. We met our clients at a junction where 3 corridors fed into the service tunnel. A cluster of men and a few women, some with bags, one in a suit gripping a metal case like it contained his heart. Camp faces, mid-city faces, all too awake around the eyes. "Sullivan?" the suited man asked, stepping forward. His hair was neat even now, a badge on his lapel that used to mean something pinned there out of habit. "That is me." I counted heads. "You are short. The rest are coming. We go on time. Anyone late can die with the honest citizens." Remy moved through the cluster, counting quietly, nudging them into rough order. He had learned fast that keeping them walking was the only way to stop them thinking. The last few rushed in. A grey-bearded man with a limp and 2 boys, a couple with a toddler, a broad-shouldered man in work overalls. I filed them the way I always did, like goods on a manifest. "We are headed for the rib tunnel," I told them. "From there, we slip into the official evac corridor just before the trains. No more checkpoints. The worst part is behind you." An old line. It had never been a lie before. We moved. Guiding a group like that is part choreography, part threat. Close enough that no one drifts, loose enough that a stumble does not take half the line down. Remy trotted at the rear, tapping shoulders, hissing at stragglers. I walked in front, fingers brushing the wall, counting junctions without looking, letting my feet find turns faster than my thoughts. The maintenance level ran along the Titan's lower spine. Reinforced walls bulged around pale arcs of bone jutting like buried roots. Thick cables ran along brackets overhead, drawing power from bone reactors deeper in the skeleton. Those were simple enough in concept. Push mechanical stress into Titan bone, harvest the energy that comes out. The details had never interested me. To me, they meant lights and motors paid for by old bones that had already done their dying. The bombardment above came down as a shudder underfoot, a pause and then a thump that reminded everyone up there who owned the sky. Down here, you could pretend it was heavy machinery. We passed a closed blast door scarred with rust, then a service hatch only tunnel rats used. I had carved my own lock sign into the edge years ago, a narrow crescent mark. Remy's eyes flicked to it, then to me. "You sure the ribs are safe?" he murmured. "They have held up the city since before you were born. The engineers put the evac tunnel through them for a reason." I checked the time on my battered wristpiece, running through the timetable I had bribed off a rail clerk. "If anyone questions your faith, remind them the government trusted the bones more than their own concrete. You are not exactly a believer in government choices." "Exactly. If even I trust them on this, you are fine." The clients were quiet, saving breath and fear. The suited man hovered near me. The broad-shouldered worker stayed close to his family. The old man with the limp kept pace with help from one of the boys. We took a last set of stairs down. The air cooled. My mental map slotted over the one in my hand, old marks from dead mentors lining up with reality under my boots. The corridor opened into the Titan's rib tunnel. The first time I saw it as a boy, I stopped and stared until Yusuf cuffed me for wasting time. I remembered that now and did not stop. The ribs arched overhead like the inside of a giant cage. Bone gleamed where engineers had cut and polished it, the gaps braced with metal girders and concrete ribs of their own. Rail tracks ran along the far side behind a barrier, waiting for evac trains. Our path was a raised service ledge that ran under the ribs and joined an access gate near the loading point. The clients slowed, some looking up. The Titan had fallen before anyone alive remembered, but its scale still did something to people. It reminded them there were things in the world that made their governments look small. "Eyes forward," I called. "You can tell stories about the ribs from a train seat." Remy came up beside me. "You ever worry we built too much into this thing, like we are living inside a grave?" Graves do not care who lives in them. I believed it when I said it. I had never had reason not to. We were halfway through when the first crack cut the air, a sharp, dry sound high above. I stopped so fast the suited man almost collided with me. The line bunched up, muttering. Another crack. A pale dust drifted down from the inner curve of the nearest rib. The engineers sometimes stressed these arches, but never during an evac, never without sirens or lights. We had none of those. "Move," I snapped. "Stay tight." "Sully," Remy whispered. He was looking up. Thin seams were opening across the rib's inner surface, straight as old scars splitting. For a heartbeat, they were just finger-wide lines in bone. Then something slid out. Spines was the only word. Needle-thin at first, thickening as they extended, they shot downward with horrifying speed. They did not fall like rubble, they thrust. The first row of clients never had a chance. A spine punched into the broad-shouldered worker's back just above his belt and came out his chest white and clean. His body snapped rigid. Another spine took the suited man between the shoulders and buried itself somewhere inside him. A dozen more struck backs and necks and shoulders along the row. People screamed, tried to run. There was nowhere to go. More spines stabbed from both sides, crossing the tunnel like a forest that grew in a heartbeat. One grazed my side, burning along my ribs. Another slashed my forearm, tearing through the sleeve and carving a line in my skin. I shoved backward on instinct, dragging Remy toward the wall. A spine flashed between us and speared a man behind, pinning him to concrete. Wet sound, cut-off cry. Then the spines stopped growing. For a breath, the tunnel froze. White bone rods jutted down from the ribs, sunk deep into the backs of my clients. Where they emerged, pale surfaces bulged and branched under clothing. Bodies hung locked in postures of flight and flinch, arms half raised, mouths open. Then they moved, not like people, like parts. They straightened together, legs planted, hands clenched into matching fists, heads tilted to the same angle as if some invisible drill instructor had barked a command. The broad-shouldered man's eyes met mine. There was someone there behind the terror, but his body was no longer his. The whole line turned, boots scraped in perfect sequence. The cluster of evacuees became a single organism with many limbs, segmented bone spines tying their backs into one flexible structure. They turned away from the tracks and began to walk back toward the city. "Remy, move!" He stared, frozen. I grabbed his collar and hauled him toward a maintenance hatch in the wall. It was not on today's plan. It existed for emergencies. As far as I knew, no one had ever used it. The marching column's footfalls drummed closer. The hatch wheel fought me. I spun it with bleeding hands and kicked the door with my shoulder until it shifted enough for us to slip into the narrow shaft beyond. Remy scrambled past. I pulled the hatch closed. No lock on this side, just rust and weight. The footsteps rolled past on the other side, regular and unhurried, like the beat of some mechanical heart. I braced my forehead on my arm and forced air in and out until my thoughts caught up. My side burned. My forearm throbbed. I pictured our path, the angle of the hatch, the direction of those retreating feet. Back into the city, away from the trains, straight toward the lower wards. Every one of them knew my routes. Remy made a thin sound behind me. The shaft barely held us both. It stank of grease and metal and old dust. When he finally found words, they came out scraped. "What was that?" "I do not know. But we cannot stay here." The shaft led to a service level parallel to the rib tunnel. Forcing the inner hatch took time. In that time, the sound of the column faded. We moved through cramped passages, following my mental map while the real one lay somewhere under marching feet. Every pale arc of bone we passed made my back itch. I kept waiting for new spines. The Titan stayed quiet here. We found a stairwell and climbed toward an access point near the camp edge. My legs shook. Remy moved on habit, eyes gone flat. When we shoved out into the street, the world had already changed. Word travels faster than soldiers. Men ran past with bundles on their backs. An overturned cart rocked in the lane. The sky over mid-city was stained with smoke where shells had hit. People were shouting about bone men. I grabbed a man racing by. "Where?" "Old flood tunnel," he gasped. "Came up out of the ground, moving like troops. They grabbed anyone in reach and kept going. The army is closing streets." He tore free and ran. "That is them," Remy said. I swore and headed toward the noise. Remy kept pace, still clutching my canvas roll as if it meant something. A squad of soldiers caught us near the corner where the camp lane met the main access road. Jumpy, fingers near triggers, armor scuffed. The officer at the front looked like his training had already run out. He raised a hand. Hold. I stopped, hands up. We came from the maintenance levels, not the flood tunnel. I know a way around. Remy opened his mouth, probably to talk about ribs. I nudged him sharply. The officer's gaze ran over my torn sleeve and the blood on my side. Name. Sullivan Fraser. His eyes narrowed. You run the tunnels. Sometimes they run me, but yes. Then you are coming with us. I thought he meant as a guide. Then they pulled my arms behind me and snapped restraints around my wrists. Is this really the time? A shove cut me off and propelled me toward an armored truck idling behind the barricade. Remy tried to follow. A rifle blocked him. He is my runner, I called. He knows my routes. The officer hesitated, then jerked his chin. Both of you. We were bundled into the back with 2 soldiers and a crate of ammunition. Doors clanged shut. Engine growled. Remy sat opposite, fingers locked around the map roll. He stared at my restraints. What did you do? He whispered. I guided people through the ribs. That is where it started. They blame you. Of course they blame me. When you do not understand something, you find a face to pin it on. Old rule. They took us not to a cell, but to a command post near the mid-city barricades, set up in an old depot that once handled Titan excavation crews. Now it held harried staffers, medics, crates, and a map table drowned in paper and markers. At the center stood Colonel Benedict Stark. I knew the name. He was the man they sent when a neighborhood misbehaved. Crackdowns, riots, organizers who went quiet, efficient, not flamboyant. He looked like he had not slept since the first shells fell, uniform rumpled, lines bracketing his mouth. His eyes were clear and sorting. The officer marched me forward. This is him. Sullivan Fraser, known smuggler. Witnesses saw him at the Titan rib tunnel when it started. Benedict studied me like a diagram. You led people through there? Yes. How many? Faces flashed in my mind, then bodies locking together. Enough that the trains would have noticed if they arrived. They will not. Describe what happened. In other circumstances, I might have embroidered. Now I just told him. Seams opening, spines shooting, evacuees knitting into a marching line. Remy stood near the door, gripping the map roll. When I finished, the room tightened. Someone scribbled notes. Another cursed. Benedict drummed fingers on the map table. We have reports of a formation moving through flood tunnels and storm drains. Uniform pace, no visible commander. Units that tried to block it took heavy casualties. Whatever this is, it is spreading. It is using my routes. The first group I led knew that path. Now it is walking it in reverse. You are sure? Where else would it have come up? The ribs connect to the flood tunnels near the old head wall. From there you can reach half the city without seeing daylight. He glanced at a wall where someone had pinned a crude underground diagram. Most of it was blank. Official maps never bothered with the old sections. That was my business. You know these tunnels. I live in them. Then you have 2 choices. Help me track and stop this, or stand in front of a squad and give them something harmless to shoot while it keeps marching. He did not raise his voice. Men like him do not bluff about death. They assign it. In exchange, I said, I walk out breathing. That depends how much damage you prevent. His face did not change. If you refuse, the answer is simple. I believed him. I nodded. Then you are hiring a guide. Good. Get his restraints off and bring Dr. Gray. The restraints popped open. Blood prickled back into my fingers. I flexed them and pretended it did not bother me. Remy edged closer, uncertain if he was included in the bargain. The boy, Benedict asked. He is more useful than he looks. Remy straightened. Then keep him close, Benedict said. If he becomes a liability, he does not stay close. A man in a technician's uniform entered with a case and a stack of data slates. Shorter than me, hair gone from neat to frayed, wire-rimmed lenses. "Dr. Cornelius Gray," Benedict said. "He designs Titan tunnels. He will tell us how the bones just grew spears." Cornelius set his case down and opened it. Diagrams, marrow vials. His mouth was tight. "I heard the rumors," he said. "I hoped they were only that." "You knew this was possible?" Benedict's tone sharpened. "The Titan's bones are not normal. That is why we use them." Cornelius pushed his lenses up. "They carry stress differently, release energy when compressed. Years ago, during excavation, we saw reactions. Twitching along fractures when we drilled, odd growth patterns in samples. I logged it. Funding moved elsewhere." "You built the evac tunnel through the ribs," I said. "We reinforced them. Anchored supports, shock absorbers. On the scale of a city, we assumed the structure was inert." He winced at his own word. "Measurements do not scream when something goes wrong," I said. "We do not have time for guilt," Benedict cut in. "Sullivan, Dr. Gray, you go under guard into the tunnels. Scout ahead of this column. Figure how it moves, where it is going, and how to stop it. Every minute you stand here is another street at risk." Orders rippled out. A squad formed. Someone shoved a vest and helmet into my arms. Remy kept his worn jacket, hugging it like armor. I had always thought of the Titan as dead, a useful corpse, a foundation. I had never imagined it might move again, even in pieces. Now I was going back into its bones to chase whatever had woken. We dropped into the tunnels from a different access point, closer to flood controls. 6 soldiers, me, Remy, and Cornelius with his case strapped tight. The soldiers moved like men whose training manual had not covered marching corpses in living bone. Cornelius walked just behind me, fingertips brushing walls, glancing at a handheld that translated vibrations into jagged lines. We followed reports from scouts and panicked civilians. The column surfaced here, then there. It preferred underground, only coming up when forced. Each time it appeared, more people vanished into it. We finally caught it at a junction where 3 storm drains met. I heard it first. Impacts carrying through stone. Like a platoon on drill, slower and heavier. Not a panicked crowd. Controlled. Benedict's men fanned out, rifles raised. Cornelius crouched by the wall, eyes on his device. We reached an opening and looked through. The column filled the drain from wall to wall. Bodies shoulder to shoulder under pale ribs of bone, sprouting from ceiling and sides. Spines threaded their backs, linking one to the next. Clothes were ripped where bone pushed through. Some still wore evac tags, camp jackets, work overalls. A few clutched bags that swung in unison. Faces stared straight ahead, eyes blank, mouths slack or clenched. None turned toward us in the side tunnel. As they passed, I recognized the broad-shouldered worker from the ribs, bone rising from his spine to his skull like a parasitic stalk. Next to him, the suited man stumbled in the same way at the same moment. New spines lashed out from the flanks. A maintenance man tried to scramble away. A spine speared him between the shoulders. His body snapped into line. A bone spike punched up from beneath, hooking a crawling boy through the calf and dragging him upright into the rhythm. The squad leader swore. "You cannot fight that with rifles!" One of his men fired anyway, 3 short bursts at heads. Skulls snapped back. The column did not stop. Bodies stayed upright, held by spines sunk deep into vertebrae and pelvis. Only when a shot took an entire upper body and the spine with it did a host collapse. The column flowed around the gap, bone flexed and rebraced like a bridge shifting weight. "It is directing force through them," Cornelius whispered, using their skeletons as bracing. We gave it a framework. Now it is adding its own pieces. "Where is it going?" I asked. He tapped his device. "Load is increasing along this tunnel. It follows stress lines and conduits, like water through carved channels." "Who designed those channels?" I did. He watched the march like a man seeing his own hand strangle him. Remy tugged my sleeve. "Look." In an offshoot tunnel, a cluster of camp families huddled against the wall. Mostly women and children, some elders. A man I knew from the market clutching a tin trunk. If the column veered even slightly, it would sweep them up. "We pull them out," I said. "We are not here for rescue," the squad leader replied. "You are here to stop that thing. Everybody it takes makes it harder to stop later." He grimaced, then nodded to two men. "Quick, short bursts. Grab who you can. Do not touch the bone." They waded into danger, hauling people toward us, while the rest of the cluster bolted. They pulled 3, then 5, then 8 out, before a spine whipped from the column and punched through one soldier's thigh. He went down screaming. A second spine took him in the back and jerked him upright. The squad leader ripped the rifle from his hands and shot him in the face. His body still moved, dragged by bone. It took 3 more shots to sever enough spine and skull to drop him. No one lingered after that. We pulled who we could. The rest fled down side tunnels. The column marched on, indifferent. We fell back to a safer junction. Sweat stung my wounds. The rescued cluster huddled away from all of us, eyes wide. Cornelius tapped his display. "It is heading toward the upper spine, the main power hub." "He means Crown Station," I told the soldiers, "where they buried bone reactors and wrapped them in steel." "What happens if it gets there?" the squad leader asked. "If it reaches the hub, it touches every stress conduit we tied into the skeleton," Cornelius said. "It might move more than ribs and spines, support structures, vertebrae. We could lose whole districts to ground failure." "You are saying the city might come down because you wired a corpse for power." "We wired it for stability and energy," Cornelius muttered. "It kept a few reflexes." In my head, I traced routes from here to Crown Station through old excavation and new tunnels, official and otherwise. Many overlapped my own paths. Benedict was not going to like that answer. We returned to the command post with our report and a handful of survivors. The room hummed. Messages came in, piled, were shouted across tables. The city bled from a dozen holes. Benedict listened. "So it is heading for our spine," he said. "And it is using your routes." "Yes. Then you know where we can block it." "One problem." I touched the bandage on my side. "Every place you can block it is full of people. Flood shelters, tram stops, stairheads. It likes crowds." "Crowds are features, not bugs," he said. "The more bodies it has, the harder it will be to stop later." The words scraped. "Those bodies are only there because your evac plan bottlenecked them. You accusing me of building this thing. I am accusing you of turning human beings into numbers on a board. You do the same when you sell them shortcuts." That stopped me. I hated him for being right. He let the silence sit, then straightened. "You are saying the city might come down because you wired a corpse for power." "We wired it for stability and energy," Cornelius muttered. "It kept a few reflexes." In my head, I traced routes from here to Crown Station, through old excavation and new tunnels, official and otherwise. Many overlapped my own paths. Benedict was not going to like that answer. We returned to the command post with our report and a handful of survivors. The room hummed. Messages came in, piled, were shouted across tables. The city bled from a dozen holes. Benedict listened. "So it is heading for our spine," he said, "and it is using your routes." "Yes." "Then you know where we can block it." "One problem." I touched the bandage on my side. "Every place you can block it is full of people. Flood shelters, tram stops, stairheads. It likes crowds." "Crowds are features, not bugs," he said. "The more bodies it has, the harder it will be to stop later." The words scraped. "Those bodies are only there because your evac plan bottlenecked them." "You accusing me of building this thing?" "I am accusing you of turning human beings into numbers on a board. You do the same when you sell them shortcuts." That stopped me. I hated him for being right. He let the silence sit, then straightened. "We will not win a moral contest with a pile of bones. Our job is to keep as much of this city standing as possible. Sullivan, Dr. Gray, Keep tracking it. Find places we can bring down tunnels without collapsing half a district. I want options. I swallowed the urge to ask who would still be alive to live in what we saved. Before we headed back out, a runner slid up and tugged my sleeve. "Sully, Adrian wants you." Of course he did. Adrian's star never liked daylight, especially on days like this. He used men like this runner, lean, alert, with the hard eyes of small thieves who had graduated. I glanced at Benedict. He nodded once. "Make it quick. If he is still thinking about money, I want to know how." Adrian had taken over a disused water treatment plant below mid-city. Once it handled runoff. Now it handled smuggling, bribery, information. Today, it buzzed like a hive full of armed men and stacked crates. He met me in a side office overlooking the main chamber. Plain shirt and slacks, trimmed beard, neat hair, unremarkable. His eyes did all the work. "Sully." He took in the damp, stained clothes, the field dressing on my side, the dust in my hair. "You have had a day. You hear about marching corpses?" I dropped into a chair. "Enough." He steepled his fingers. "You were there when it started." I made a non-committal sound. "Benedict has you on a chain," Adrian said. "I hear things. Chains can be pulled from both ends if you know where to tug." "What are you offering, Adrian? Time is expensive." "Opportunity. The marching column is a nightmare for Benedict. For us, it can be useful." "How do you profit off a bone monster that eats neighborhoods?" "By aiming it at the right neighborhoods." He spread his hands. "You know the tunnels. Benedict is using you to try to block the thing. I want you to send it somewhere instead." "You want to steer it?" "Yes, toward enemy lines, board members' estates, rival depots. We cannot stop it, so we give it targets we can live with." "You think it listens to maps?" I asked. "You think you can live with that?" "I think it follows stress lines and paths already carved. You have those in your head. Give me routes that lead it where I want, and I will handle the rest." "And in return?" "You will not have to worry about Benedict shooting you when he is done with you. You and your shadow." He flicked his chin toward the doorway where Remy lurked. "Will have a place in whatever city remains. Supplies, protection, shares in the new routes." He was offering the one thing I had chased all my life, survival, with a seat attached. Part of me leaned toward it. Another part saw the broad-shouldered worker's eyes behind bone, and the boy hooked like scrap in the storm drain. "Benedict wants to bury it," I said. "You want to use it. You both treat it like a tool." "What do you treat tunnels as?" His tone stayed mild. "You bend space through knowledge. You have done it all your life. I bend space, not people. You move people for money." His eyebrow flicked up. "The distinction is thinner than you pretend." That stung because it was true. "I cannot promise you anything," I said. "Benedict watches every move. I am not asking for promises." His smile turned soft and dangerous. "When you see a chance to nudge the column toward a place that deserves destruction more than others, remember this conversation. Send a note, a mark on a wall. You are good at hiding messages." I stood. The room tilted briefly with exhaustion. "If I walk out of this city, it will be because everyone wants me alive more than dead." "That has always been your skill." He reached for my arm as I turned. "Sully, this is what you are made for. You do not owe this city anything. It never gave us more than scraps." I pulled away. "We will see which way the map takes me." The map took us through hell. The column kept moving. Reports of it surfacing in markets, under tram platforms, near water points. Each time it grew. Each time it dropped back into the bones. Benedict's staff chased it on paper and radio. Cornelius and I led teams along likely paths, sometimes catching a glimpse, sometimes only the aftermath. Torn clothing, smeared tracks, a toy on its side where a child had been lifted, bone dust on concrete. Between runs, we argued with Benedict. He leaned toward decisive cuts. Bring down tunnels here and here, entomb it, accept the damage. When Cornelius warned about secondary collapses, he weighed them like numbers. "What are a few wards?" he said once. "If the alternative is the city dropping into the Titan's spine." "They are not a few wards. They are everyone I grew up with." "They are columns in a ledger," he snapped. "One side is the districts you know. The other is all the districts above them. You do the math." I did not like the math. Understanding it made it worse. Still, I played along. I gave him options, guided squads to set charges, marked walls. Some sites were under old industrial blocks, some under crowded housing. At the same time, I slipped small marks to Adrian's runners, corners, scraps. I told myself I was hedging. Then one of those nudges went wrong, and a shelter died. It was a flood shelter near the camp, carved out of an old excavation chamber. I had marked a route meant to send the column through unused storage one level above, giving Adrian an excuse to clear a rival's warehouse. The ground under the camp was a maze of old work and patches. The column's sense of stress lines did not match my old notes. It slipped one level off my path and came up in the shelter itself. Remy and I reached a viewing slit just as the first spines punched through ceiling and floor. The shelter was packed. Men, women, children, old men with blankets on their knees. They had gone underground on the promise that stone would keep them safe from shells. The Titan's ribs did not care. White spines lanced through the crowd, locking people upright in rows. Screams, shouted prayers, orders from volunteers, all shredded in seconds under the marching rhythm. Remy's palm hit the wall hard enough to scrape skin. He knew faces in there. So did I. A food vendor who gave him scraps, a boy he played cards with, a woman who once lent me her pot for a night. I had treated this shelter as a mark on a map, an obstacle or a resource. Now it was being folded into the Titan. "We have to go," I heard myself say. Staying meant dying with them. That would not help them, and it would not undo my mark. We stumbled back along the corridor. Remy moved like he was underwater. He did not speak until we reached quieter stone. When he turned, his face held a new tightness. "You drew that line," he said. "You told it where to walk. I misjudged the level. I thought it would skirt the shelter." "You thought," his voice shook. "You thought and they are gone." Anything I said would sound like cowardice dressed up. I swallowed explanations. "You can leave," I told him. "You do not have to follow me." "Go where?" He jerked his chin toward some vague up there. "My home just walked away on someone else's spine. You think I'm safe anywhere?" He walked ahead of me after that, shoulders stiff. That night, Benedict pulled Cornelius and me into a small room away from the noise. He shut the door and dropped a folder on the table. "We have one chance to stop it near Crown Station. After that, it is inside the main supports. We will not know what happens if we hit it." Cornelius opened the folder. Old diagrams, brittle at the edges. Early excavation plans for the Titan's spine. I traced labels I had heard in Yusuf's stories. "I did not know you still had these," I said. "We did not think we needed them." Benedict rubbed his eyes. "We were wrong." Cornelius pointed at shaded zones around Crown Station. "These chambers are structurally unstable. Early reactor tests went bad. We flooded them with quick-set compound and walked away. If the column passes through here, explosions might bring the ceiling down." "And everything above," I said. "Camp blocks, old industry, tram lines. You bury a big piece of the lower city. And if we do nothing, we risk all of it." Benedict tapped the central node. "The planners used the spine as foundation. If it shifts, the rest follows. You are not talking about a few wards anymore." "I do not enjoy this," he said. "There is no clean option. We lure it into those zones, detonate, and pray the bones do not twist more than we can handle, or we let it decide what to take." The shaded zones matched Yusuf's tales of accidents and near collapses, men buried under wet concrete and bone. "Yusuf worked those fronts," I murmured. "The man who taught me these tunnels." I straightened. "If you want this trap, I need every crack and support in that area. I talked to him. "Do it," Benedict said. "Fast." "If we read this wrong," Cornelius said quietly, "we might give it better leverage instead of killing it." "I thought engineers liked pressure." "We like control more." He looked at me. "If you have doubts, resolve them. Once the charges are set, there is no taking them back. I passed out 3 tunnels ago." I rolled up the plans. "Now we are in the part of the map that says, 'Here be monsters.'" He snorted without humor. I went to see Yusuf. He still lived where he always had. A cramped room carved out of an old excavation office near the Titan's pelvis. Faded hazard signs on the walls. A broken drill bit leaning in a corner. Shelves built from tool racks and loaded with paper and parts. He looked older, which seemed fair. The day had aged us all. His left leg dragged from an old collapse, back bent but stubborn. "Sully." He peered at me, then at the roll of plans. "Here you woke the landlord." "That is one way to put it." I shut the door. "We need to talk about Crown Station." He laughed, dry and sharp. "Now everyone remembers that name." I spread the diagrams. He leaned over them, tracing lines with calloused fingers. "You remember the test chambers around the hub?" I asked. "The ones they flooded?" He nodded slowly. "I remember the day they told us to run and never come back. Some did not run fast enough. Concrete froze around them. We poured a tomb and called it safety." "There is something moving in the bones," I said. "Heading for that hub. Benedict wants to bring ceilings down on it there. If we do it right, we trap it. If we do it wrong, we drop half the city." I always thought the Titan was not as dead as they claimed. He rubbed his chin. "Back when my hands were on the drills, you could feel tiny shivers along the bit in certain veins, like poking muscle, not stone." "You think it remembered us?" "I think nothing that big forgets." He tapped a shaded zone. "These parts are rotten. Fill poured bad, supports set cheap. If your bone parade walks here, it will not take much to make things fall. The question is, how much you want to bury. Benedict would bury the lower city to save the towers. And you?" In my mind, the lower city held the only people who ever knew my name. The towers were full of people who never had to. I would be lying if that did not tilt the scale. "I am tired of lining up people's feet without looking where they land," I said. "You built a life on that. Maybe it is time I build a different one. You will still be walking on bone." He peered closer. "Here." He tapped a thin line. "Service drift they never logged properly. We cut it for crews as a shortcut. Runs parallel to the hub. Hooks into those unstable chambers from the side. If you get your bone column to follow you, you might collapse just enough to break its spine without dropping the whole city. You will crush anything in that drift. Men, goods, whoever is there. There is a man whose goods I would not mind burying." I thought of Adrian's depots tucked into forgotten corners. He has been happy enough to risk everyone else. Yusuf's eyes glinted. "That sounds like the Sully I know." "Maybe, but this time I choose who gets used, not whoever pays best." He pushed back with a wince. "You are not going to save the city. At best you carve out one less ugly scar. I am not in the saving business." I rolled up the plans. "I'm just trying to live with what I do this time." Benedict did not like my idea at first. He preferred clean lines and counted sacrifices. "We do not know if this will be enough," he said. "We do not know any plan will be," I said. "This way we do not write off whole districts before we try. We hit it near its reflex center, take one parasite off our backs while we are at it." "You have a personal angle. So do you." I spread Yusuf's sketch over his diagrams. "The drift lets us place charges close without undermining main supports. The fill is bad, it will fall easier. That is what you wanted." He stared, then gave a single reluctant nod. "All right, we do it your way first. You lead it into the drift, we line it with explosives. When enough of the column is inside, we bring it down. If that fails, we go to my option." "How many die if we use yours?" I asked. Do not make me say the number. Just make yours work. We laid the groundwork fast. Demolition teams rushed charges into place along the drift and unstable chambers. Cornelius supervised, adjusting placements for stress points. I chalked routes on walls and in my head, building a path that intersected the column's likely course. I also left a small mark where I knew a runner would see it. A note that there were goods worth moving from a depot near Crown Station, urgent and profitable, before dawn. If the city held together, Adrian would be there in person. He never trusted anyone else with high-value cargo when the ground shook. Remy saw me make the mark. "Who was that for?" he asked. "Someone who thinks he can ride this storm without getting wet." "You are using the column as a weapon." "Yes." "How is that different from what Adrian wanted?" "Because I am not trading strangers anymore." I made myself meet his eyes. "I am trading a man who helped build this and told himself his hands were clean." "You helped him," Remy whispered. "I know." The words tore on the way out. "That is why I have to be the one to break it." He gave a curt nod. He did not forgive me. He did not leave either. We went to meet the column. The drift entrance sat at a junction of 3 tunnels. One carried floodwater during storms. One ran toward Crown Station. The third was a narrow maintenance passage disappearing into dark, barely wide enough for 2 men. We waited in a recess off the main tunnel, charges wired along the drift walls. Cables ran back to a detonator case, and from there to a primary trigger Benedict would hold at the command post. Cornelius knelt by the stone, palm flat, listening. "It is close," he murmured. "Load is rising on the main beam." Remy shifted from foot to foot, knuckles white on a pistol grip. He had never used a gun before that day. I was not sure he should now, but nobody was asking permission. The sound came as it always did, building from faint thuds to a solid beat. Vibration crept up through our feet and into our bones. The column flowed into the junction like a river. It filled the flood tunnel, shoulder to shoulder, spine to spine. Bootfalls shook dust from the ceiling. Spines anchored bodies to ribs overhead and to the walls, a single thick structure wrapped in meat. As it approached, a figure at the front resolved into someone I knew. Adrian. The bone through his back jutted from his chest, splitting his shirt. His hands clenched and opened in time with the others. His head tilted at the same angle. Only his eyes were his, wide and furious and trapped. So much for protection. Behind him marched others I recognized. A rail clerk, a guard who once took my bribes with a shrug, a camp elder, one of Remy's card partners. Men who had thought knowing our routes or deals made them safe. Something twisted in me. Control had always been a story we told ourselves. "All right," I whispered. "Come on, follow me." I stepped into the tunnel. Soldiers hissed behind me, but I had already moved. The column did not react. It marched past, a parade of stolen bodies. Spines held them too rigid to turn their heads. I walked parallel to them, close enough to feel displaced air at each swing. Any spine might decide I belonged. At the junction, I angled toward the drift. I pulled a flare, snapped it, and tossed it into the narrow passage. It rolled, throwing harsh light down a corridor that had not seen it in years. The column stopped. The rhythm faltered. A collective half-step. The spines along their backs rippled, adjusting. "It is reading the drift," Cornelius called. "The fill beyond is looser, easier to deform. It is attractive." "Good." My mouth was dry. "Let it be greedy." The front ranks angled toward the drift, bodies scraping as they reoriented. Adrian's face passed within an arm's length. His eyes burned with something between accusation and plea. "I know," I whispered, too quiet for anyone else. "I built this. I am the one breaking it. That will have to do." He marched on, dragged by bone. The column began to file into the drift. It moved slower now, compressed by narrow walls. Each body had to align precisely. New spines grew from overhead ribs, hooking into backs and shoulders, the passage filled with bone and flesh. I backed ahead into the flare's light. Remy kept pace. "You should not be here," I muttered. "If you die, someone has to tell this story," he said. I almost laughed, then realized he was serious. Behind us, Cornelius and the soldiers held at the junction, watching the flow. A radio crackled as someone relayed updates to Benedict. The detonator waited. More of the column poured in, flooding into the unstable chambers beyond. The stone's stress changed. I felt it as a wrongness under my feet. Cornelius saw it as spiking lines. "Now," he called as we crossed the line where the wiring ended. Far behind, Benedict sent the signal. The world tore. The first blast blew out the drift ceiling 20 paces behind us. Stone, bone, and steel snapped. The columns stiffened, bodies slammed into each other, spines buckled at the edges. The second wave of charges detonated in the rotten fill of the test chambers. Old concrete and bad supports gave way. Slabs of ceiling dropped, pounding rows of hosts, shattering spines. The Titan's bones reacted like something wounded. Ribs flexed. A deep vibration rolled through the drift, too low for ears, straight into marrow. I staggered. Remy grabbed my vest and dragged me forward. Behind, the column convulsed. Synchrony shattered. Some bodies tried to march. Others were yanked backward by collapsing anchors. Bones snapped, twisted, regrew along jagged lines, trying to rebuild structure out of broken parts. The floor cracked. A section slumped into a rough slope. I almost went down. Remy hauled me up. "Move," he hissed. We ran. Stone and bone crashed around us. Dust turned the air into paste. Someone shouted back at the junction and cut off in mid-cry. A slab gave way behind, sealing the path to the command post with a wall of rubble. For a weird instant, there was just ringing silence. Then a new sound rose from the buried mass. A grinding, chaotic chorus of movement. Nothing like its old marching beat. Whatever was left of the Titan's reflexes thrashed in the collapsed chambers, trying to reassemble from broken parts. Up top, buildings cracked and a few old structures sagged, but the catastrophic shearing we feared did not come. Down in the drift, all I knew was that a wall of rubble blocked the way back, and something huge and hurt still writhed behind it. "Benedict!" I barked into my radio. Static answered. The stone between us might as well have been sky. Remy tapped my arm and pointed ahead. The drift continued, choked with rubble but passable in places. Beyond, dim light leaked from cracks where chambers met other tunnels. "Forward," he said. "Only way left." We picked through rubble, stepping over crushed limbs and splintered bone. Some hosts still stood, pinned under fallen ribs, torsos pointing one way, legs another. Adrian's face stared from a gap between slabs, spine snapped and jutting from his mouth like a white tongue. For a moment I thought I saw recognition. Dust slid over his features as the stone settled. I did not stop. There was nothing here that could be fixed. We squeezed through a narrow gap and dropped into a different tunnel, one I had not walked in years. Damp stone, old machinery smells, faint light from an upward stairwell. Behind us the grinding lessened. Without a full structure to inhabit, whatever was in the bones had to settle for local spasms and twitches. We had sheared off a good part of its nervous system. It was not dead, but it was hurt. We emerged into a battered peripheral ward. Buildings leaned, streets cracked, dust veiled everything. The sky glowed dull red where fires burned. I looked back toward the city's heart. Somewhere under those blocks, Crown Station still hummed. Somewhere under my feet, the Titan shifted into a new shape. "Did we stop it?" Remy asked, breathing hard. "We stopped part of it," I said. "Enough that it will not parade troops through the tunnels for a while. And the rest of the city? Still under siege, still corrupt, still full of people who will use whatever is under them as leverage." I shrugged. Some things a column cannot fix. We did not head toward the command post. The stone in the drift might have killed the radio. My sense of probability was intact. If Benedict lived, He would call this a partial success and start planning the next hard choice. If he died, someone like him would take his map. Adrian was buried in the same bones he tried to ride. His network would fracture and be eaten by smaller men with sharper teeth. The city would rebuild where it could, abandon what it could not, and keep going the way it always had. On the backs of those with the least choice, the Titan would remain. We had hacked at its awakening and broken one attempt to reclaim its shape. It was still there, a continent of bone. Somewhere in its ribs and vertebrae, other reflexes might stir. Remy looked at the canvas roll he still carried. Somehow, it had survived the collapse with only scuffs. He held it out. "You want this?" I took it. Inside were my maps, patched and scribbled, full of shortcuts and secrets. They had always been my power. They had almost been our end. "I cannot throw them away," I said. "I would not know who I am without them." I glanced up at the Titan's ribs on the horizon, pale arches watching a wounded city. Every route is a choice. Every shortcut is a line through someone's life. Remy snorted. "You getting soft on me, Sully?" "Do not worry." I slung the map case over my shoulder. "We will still charge. We just might turn down the worst jobs. That will confuse everyone." "Good. Maybe they will stop assuming they can buy their way out of anything." We walked, skirting a cracked road, stepping around rubble and craters. In the distance, people hauled supplies, shifted rubble, tended the wounded. No one here had time to worry who had guided a bone column into which tunnel. Survival ate every spare thought. I did not know where we were going. There might still be trains beyond the ribs if the tracks held. Other cities, other camps, other bones. I did not start by calculating profit. I made sure Remy was keeping up, adjusted the map strap on my shoulder, and walked under the shadow of the wounded Titan, listening for the movement under the ground and hoping that, for a while, it was nothing more than the city settling into its new scars.